Good afternoon. I'm Andy Eastman from Riverwoods, Illinois, and this is my third summit. When I found out that I would introduce Adam Kinzinger and Stephen Richer, I thought about a favorite quote from Senator John McCain. We were born to love, and we were born to have the courage for it. So be brave, the rest is easy. Adam, Stephen, and whistleblowers I've worked with to expose abuse in women's soccer show that courage and heartfelt care for others can be transformative forces for good. It's love of country plus courage that led Adam to write, "The attack on the Capitol was a wake-up call. It was a direct assault on the peaceful transfer of power, a principle that is the bedrock of our republic. Many in my party chose to downplay or defend the actions of those who sought to overturn a free and fair election. I could not in good conscience remain silent. I like being able to look in the mirror, and I look forward to telling my son what it means to stand against the pressure of the masses." Adam's principled perspective is also popular with voters, despite what you may hear. A recent Washington Post poll found that 83% of Americans oppose President Trump's pardons of violent January 6 offenders. I said, well, we got to see why yesterday, and now I can update it today as well. In their public service, Adam and Stephen have embodied our core principles through costly personal actions. I hope they stay in the fight to improve our politics. I look forward to their conversation, and I welcome them up to the stage.
Thank you. Hey. What's up? Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Before Stephen opens, let me just say, McCain also had a favorite saying of mine. He goes, "It's always darkest before it gets pitch black."
Is that how you want to lead?
Yeah, that's how we'll start this
today. All right, test. Is this one good? This one's good? All right, fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, Adam Kinzinger, a husband, a dad, a pilot, a congressman who served Illinois, 2 different districts in Illinois, on the select committee, and I think more than maybe anyone who has been with Principles First over the last, not just this year, the year before, the year before, the year before, but has been with Principles First pretty much since the beginning. I think, to borrow from a previous panel, Adam Kinzinger is our Ajax. He is our gladiator in the ring. Let's give it up for our fighter.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I know you want to talk about the Proud Boys and their little visit yesterday and their email, but before we begin, I have some bad news. And the bad news is that Heath Mayo has decided there's a little bit of fat in Principles First. And so, Adam, I'm hoping that you can concisely explain to me in 5 bullet points what you did last week.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Pretty much nothing. I watched TV, did a couple
gone.
videos. Yeah, see ya.
What have you been up to lately? Let's start with just some brief highlights. What have you been up to lately?
Well, look, let me first off say to everybody here, this is awesome. Thank you for being here. I like, it really, as I've been here to all of them, I've never seen a crowd like this, obviously. This is an amazing message. And thanks for sticking around after the chaos. To Stephen, if you guys don't know his story, and I'm sure you do, this is a hero. And this is somebody that was on, he was on the front lines of defending democracy. I kind of consider what I did like I was the artillery, right? I'd go on TV, but you know, he's just that guy in Washington. When you're a local person and people see you at the store and you're the one still on the front lines, that's much harder. And I've got to say, what you did was heroic, and what you continue to do was heroic. So thank you.
So what have you been up to? The people want to know.
On my end, it's this. I'm still doing the CNN gig, so I'm a senior political contributor with CNN. I've got a Substack. Please join my Substack.
Mark Cuban would want you to say the website 3 different times.
So I'm doing that, a lot of speaking, and then I've got my organization Country First, which is country1st.com. And I got to tell you what I'm really excited about is, you know, we've been sitting around for like a couple months, licking our wounds, trying to figure out what now, how do we I've got to tell you what I'm feeling, this energy that's really popped up in the last week. America's ready to fight back. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to take, obviously, there's an election, that's going to be the most important thing, but Americans standing up, having their voice heard, saying things like, we're not going to let the richest man and the most powerful man tell us how to live anymore, and we're not going to allow our members of Congress and the Senate to pretend like they have our best interests at heart when they clearly don't, and they'll even say it. They're there to do what Donald Trump wants. Not what the district wants, not what's good for the country, what Donald Trump wants. And I gotta tell you, that may fly in an election and get Donald Trump elected. That is not gonna fly long term. And I look forward to helping with all of you to lead that charge to take our country back.
That sounds good. Okay. According to Raw Story, they posted the email that principals first received, and among other things, unflattering things, it said, Mark Cuban, Chris Christie, John Bolton, George Conway, Mike Ludwig, Adam Kinzinger, Michael Steele, Jeff Duncan, Bill Kristol, Frank Glenn, Stephen Richer, Norm Eisen, and especially Michael Fanone, all deserve to die. Why do you think you were, 7th? And what do you, like again, back to OPM, have you been doing enough over the last few weeks?
Is it alphabetical or anything? I don't know. Look.
No, it's not alphabetical. Sorry.
Dang it. Thank you. None of y'all were on it, so.
Yeah, they expanded the college football playoff to the top 12, so you're all good.
Let me just say this, and I despise the fact that coarse language has become such a part of our political dialogue, but, okay, sometimes I think the only thing you can explain something with is with coarse language, and so please forgive me for saying this, but what a bunch of fucking sissies those guys are. I mean, it's the only way to describe it because, look, if you, as your total existence, you've now decided you're going to try to intimidate people that come together and say, we want to put principles first. Yeah, we oppose your political movement, sorry guys, but here's what we want. And you're going to come and you're going to think that you're going to intimidate us. You think you're going to intimidate Michael Fanone and Harry Dunn. Guess what? You won't. And there is nothing you can do that will intimidate me. Yeah. And in fact, I've just decided to be twice as worse against you because of that. And so to me, that's why I think it's so important that you all stuck around and stayed here. You can threaten us, you can try to belittle us, you can try to play act like you're a bunch of brown shirts, but guess what? You're not gonna win, we're gonna win. And I know that for a fact.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here still. I know that most people are not from the DC metro area, so thank you for taking a late flight back. It means a lot to me. I know it means a lot to Heath. I know it means a lot to Adam and to the whole gang here. Okay, switching topics. We've got Pete Hegseth. We've got Tulsi Gabbard. We've got Kash Patel. We've got RFK Jr. Which one do you think is going to be even worse than this group thinks? And which one do you think might sort of pleasantly surprise us a little bit?
I don't think any of them are going to pleasantly surprise you, but if I had to pick at who I think could potentially not be as bad as we expect, I mean, look, literally, because I have to pick one, I would say there's a possibility it's Hegseth, and only for this reason, because when you are the civilian leadership, you either have, and this happens with like secretaries of the Air Force or Army, you either are a leader in that position or you are led by the officers, for instance, in that position. I think Pete Hegseth is so outmatched in terms of the Pentagon, the bureaucracy, the fact that he has no experience, that I hope that actually the 4 stars and stuff in the Pentagon continue that ship going where it needs to be. And he can sit there, and I've already seen it. I mean, he should be too busy to sit there and tweet videos about woke and DEI and all this stuff, but he obviously has enough time to do it. And so I think it's quite possible that they may be patting him on the head and saying, we'll go kill America's enemies. You can tweet all about DEI all you want. The one that I worry about, obviously the most, is Kash Patel, because what the damage that he can do in terms of the trust that the American people have in the FBI and our system, right? That's one of the reasons I was so angry about not January 6th, but even before that, when the president claimed that the election was stolen, is once you break trust in these institutions, it's really tough to build trust back. The FBI, it's been politicized by, I think, the right more than anything, but once you break that trust and make it a political tool, I don't know how the FBI operates where people can trust that in insanity. So, yeah, that's probably the one I'm more concerned about, not for my own self, because I say, look, come on. I mean, bring it, right? Like, honestly. But because of what it could do to the damage in the faith in the FBI, such an important institution.
Okay. So if you were king, which is, of course, something we would only speak about hypothetically and nobody would actually ever really indulge, you would have vetoed Patel over any others. You would have gotten rid of that confirmation.
Yeah, if I had only one, like if I had a veto over and it was just one, it would have been him. Although it's tough because the rest of them are so bad. You know, the thing, RFK Jr. obviously can do a lot of damage. We know that. You know, just his like, oh, vaccines don't work or whatever. You know, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to ban vaccines, but they'll be taken off of the recommendation. Tulsi, I mean, she's dangerous because she has access to intelligence, but in her position, that's as much kind of a coordinating as it is like intel gathering. But again, if she truly is, as some of us have concern, you know, has some faith to other players out there, then there's some potential of really damaging that. Most importantly, though, is that our allies are starting to pull back and be like, I don't know if we're going to share this extremely sensitive human intelligence with you because of that. And so we could see some damage in that way. And then, of course, I already talked about Hegseth.
So on your Substack, you've been talking about Donald Trump, of course, but you've been talking about a lot of the other forces of illiberalism, both in the United States and around the world. And just today, Germany is having an election, or has had an election at this point, and I haven't seen the results, but everyone is predicting that maybe the furthest right party that they've had in a while is going to get around 20% of the vote. So how much of this that's happening in the United States, where we're talking about things like pro-Putinism or sort of an autocratic moment, how much of it is Donald Trump and it's emanating out from the United States, and how much of it is something that's broader and the United States is simply one country that's swept up in this moment?
Look, I think it's, and from what we're hearing from Germany, and it's going to be tough for them to make the coalition, they will. It's for, as far as Ukraine is concerned, I'm hearing it's about the second best option for Ukraine that could have come out of Germany, so that's decent. But look, yeah, I mean, a fifth of them voted for the Nazi party. I mean, in Germany, there's something chilling about that. And I think, look, a lot of it is this. It's what I say about Donald Trump, too. He's a symptom and a cause, right? So Donald Trump came to power, I think, as a symptom of America wanting to break the system. And plus, you look back at history, there's cycles, right? Every however many years, we flirt with fascism, we flirt with that kind of stuff. But usually, we've had leaders that were responsible enough to say, okay, I may play with this fire a little bit, but I also recognize that a fire can burn out of control and be really dangerous. And so they don't, because they're grown-ups. They recognize that their voice and the things they say have an impact. When you have a serious megalomaniacal narcissist who literally doesn't care, I mean, I can't say this enough because it's true. He does not care what happens to this country. He cares about himself. If you say you're going to have an amazing 2 years, Mr. President, but America's not going to exist in 4, or you could have a bad 2 years and America will exist in 4, you'd be like, I'll take the 2 good years. I mean, I really believe that. And so the problem is, so that's a symptom. The problem is America has a strong leadership role in the world, whether we recognize it or not, and particularly in the conservative movement. I had a conservative MP from the UK I talked to a few years ago that just told me, he goes, look, I'm concerned because what happens in American conservatism always travels to Australia, Canada, and the UK. And I told him, I said, well, first off, that's chilling. Secondly, here's a good lesson for you. Cancer does not, you can't like defeat cancer by putting good cells around it. You defeat cancer by eradicating it. And so this idea that you can bring the extremists in your party, bring them in and change them never happens. In fact, those extremists always change you, right? You can't say like, gosh, I've got cancer in my body, but I got a lot more good cells than bad cells, so I'm going to win out. It's not how it works. And so I think he is also an accelerant. I mean, the fact that people are openly supporting AfD, this neo-Nazi party, the fact that you see these movements all over the planet is largely because he and Elon and others have made it okay.
Let me put it this way then. Would AfD get 20% if Donald Trump was not president of the United States?
No, I don't think so. And I think, well, look, let's say he had lost to like Harris, I don't necessarily know if that would have affected it or not. But had Donald Trump not been in the picture, I think he's normalized what used to be seen as indecent or shameful or things like that. So I think his presence in general has allowed the AfD to feel a little more emboldened. Now, look, I'm German by descent. I don't live in Germany, obviously, and so I can't necessarily answer that for sure. Obviously, migration and things have had an impact there as well. But to say 20%, I mean, it's tough to see without that being normalized somehow.
Okay, so let's stay on foreign policy for one more question, and I know foreign policy is a major expertise and passion of yours. This group is not politically homogenous. We have a lot of different disparate interests, but I think if there are some unifying factors, it's a sense of decency, it's a sense of truth. But one of the things that is most common here is support for Ukraine.
Right.
Support for Ukraine. And it's not necessarily because Ukraine's done everything right. And we know that it hasn't been the model of liberal democracy over the last 30 years, but we would certainly say that it's going in those directions, and it shares, broadly speaking, the same values that the United States has stood for. Given that we all feel, most of us feel that way, and nobody's going to go to a dispute of sort of which side should we support, what can people in this room actually do in furtherance of the Ukrainian cause at this point in time?
Look, I would say it's easy, but it's not. I mean, the reality of it is, if the president has made the decision that we're not going to support Ukraine, we're not going to. I wish I could force a different answer. There are a few Republicans that have the courage to at least tweet that they like Ukraine still, right? But if you notice, they always never mention anything about Trump. It's always like this discussion about Putin is XYZ. It's not like Trump shouldn't say. But we should encourage that, right? I also think those people should be encouraged to say, look, Don Bacon, for instance, do you truly believe that this is an existential fight? I do. So how about this? It only takes 2 Republicans to shut down every agenda item of the House Republicans. All you have to do is say no until the president relents and says at least, look, we're not going to force Ukraine to pay us back, or we're going to at least continue to put out the money that's been appropriated, things like that. That's how you play hardball politics. They won't. That's what we have to pressure them for. We have to pressure them through their town halls. Every one of you that wear a Ukraine flag pin, believe it or not, that makes a difference. I've got a Ukraine flag on my car, and you don't see a lot of those, but I know everybody that sees that Ukraine flag goes, okay, he's making a statement. Continue to be loud and outspoken matters. And I've got to tell you, as a congressman that has had town hall meetings, has been confronted in town hall meetings, that has confronted my opponents in town hall meetings, they're very uncomfortable and very effective. Because right now, Republican members of Congress fear one person, Donald Trump. They don't fear you. When they start fearing you, and I say fear, politically, when they start fearing you, that's when they start having a different calculus of where should I go and what should I say. So that. Also, if you have extra money, give to some of these groups. Make sure it's the right group, because there are some, obviously fraudulent charities out there. That's what I would say best off. But look, we've got a generation of people, just like the United States, when we stayed in Europe after World War II, we could have claimed we were war fatigued. When people say we're war weary now, screw them. They don't know what they're talking about, right? You're tired of seeing it on TV. I'm sorry, okay? And we're not even at war. But when you see that, and you think of World War II, we stayed in Europe, and the third generation of people behind the Iron Curtain, that saw enough of what we live like here, that saw enough of what it meant to be an American, or what it meant to be French, or what it meant to be West German. They saw that enough, that third generation rose up and they tore down the Iron Curtain because they were inspired to want more. Our example, not always our military, our example is that example of self-governance and free market and a chance to live and be who you want to be that the rest of the world is desperate for. And when they see it and they're motivated by it, they tear down walls, and they do it every time. That's why our role around the world is so important, beyond just the military, beyond the fact that we can get minerals from Ukraine. It's important because we literally, by our example, free generations of people that are desperate for that freedom.
Yep. One more foreign policy question.
Sure.
Why do Republican members seem to get it with Israel? I see these situations as somewhat analogous. A freedom-hating group attacks a country that might be imperfect, but largely speaking, cares for the same liberal democratic values that we care for. And then the attacked country responds to either defend its people or defend its territory. Almost every Republican in Congress supports Israel, supports funding for Israel, supports letting Israel do whatever it needs to do to secure itself. Very few Republicans in Congress are aggressively outspoken about helping Ukraine do the same. Why?
Look, part of it is, and it would have been a good question for Russell Moore and David French, there is a religious component to it. This idea that Israel can do no wrong, right? There's also the political pressure that exists and the fact that Donald Trump supports Israel. I honestly think if Donald Trump would be a huge Ukraine supporter, every Republican would be a Ukraine supporter because they do whatever he wants. I mean, literally. It's not because they're good, it's because they do whatever he wants. And I think there's a huge point to that, which sadly is the case. And, you know, look, we can disagree with Israel on some things, we can disagree with Ukraine on some things, but listen, Israel was attacked, Ukraine was. To sit here and say that Ukraine started the war is batshit crazy. And the idea that's two bad words, sorry guys, I'm falling into the trap. But that it's crazy. And by the way, the war could stop this next second if Russia just simply ceased offensive combat operations. The war's over, that's it, right? Yep. And I want to say really quickly, Russians have lost 800,000 men dead, wounded, or captured, or missing. We lost like 400,000 or 500,000 in World War II. We liberated a continent, took down an empire with half of the casualties that Russia has had to only control 20% of Ukrainian territory. Don't tell me Russia's winning. They're not. They're barely holding on for dear life. And the only one that can save them right now is Donald Trump, and he's trying his best to do that.
Domestic politics here in the United States. When people ask me, should I run for office, I have to invoke Tim Miller and say, of course, get into the game, we need you. And then they ask me for a few recommendations. Mostly they're looking for the nuts and bolts of running in a jurisdiction. But I tell them one thing, I say, get a notebook and take out an actual pen or a pen, no, not a pencil, a pen, and write down your lines in the sand. And they might seem pretty obvious to you now, but there's going to come a point in which you're going to want to open up that notebook, remember your pre-political self, because some of those are going to look tempting to cross. Are there still lines in the sand for your former colleagues in the Congress? Because it seems like each time we hit one, January 6th being the most sort of poignant one for me, it seems like those lines get raced out. And I'm just hoping that there's a line at some point. Is there a line?
I mean, I hope so. I don't know anymore. And I hate to say that because, like, I want to bring good news and hope and inspiration, but, like, when January 6th did, like you said, when that didn't change minds, like, what is beyond that? Like, I mean, I guess if we actually tried to set up concentration camps, maybe people would be against it, I hope. But I don't know what the red line is. And the sad thing about that is, like you had said with the notebook, there are a lot of people that I do kind of feel bad for, except that they're creating real damage, that someday are going to look in their mirror and be like, what did I become? Mitch McConnell's doing that right now, by the way. And I think about it, I've got a 3-year-old kid, and I know when he reads his last name in the history books, because unfortunately it's an uncommon last name, I'm not going to be able to hide, he's going to be proud. But there are a lot of people I worked with, thank you. There's going to be a lot of people I worked with that aren't going to have that. And your shame, it's what Liz Cheney said, your shame is eternal. And so I don't know if there's a red line. I know this, that we have the political power to stop this chaos. And someday people will have red lines if we demand it. But I'll say quickly, when I ran for Congress, and this is kind of a God thing because it's the one thing I think that kind of kept me online. I came back from Iraq and then ran for Congress. And I remember when I announced, saying and thinking, you know, if I'm going to be in a position to fund people to go to war, obviously I'm a little more hawkish, so I'd probably be more likely to do that. If I'm going to fund people to go to war, if I'm going to ask young people to give their life for the United States of America, if I'm willing to do that, I have to be willing to give up my career and job for the same cause. Because I have no right to salute a flag-draped coffin of a 19-year-old that gave his life for this country, literally everything, literally the ultimate sacrifice. If I'm going to go then, after saluting that flag-draped coffin, go to Washington, D.C. and go, I know I should vote no, but I have to vote yes because otherwise I might get a primary opponent. I don't care, right? And I wear on my wrist. I wear on my wrist the name of Andreas O'Keefe, a friend of mine that was killed in Iraq in 2018 in a helicopter crash.
I can confirm that.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, this guy did not give his life for the country so that a bunch of politicians could get reelected. He gave his life for a cause. And we can even disagree on what that cause is or what the country looks like. That's actually a beautiful thing about this country. But what we can't disagree on is that any frickin' politician should ever put their career or their votes above the lives of people they're sending to war, because that is absolutely unacceptable.
22-year-old Stephen, fresh out of graduate school, was here in Washington, D.C., and he got swept up in something called the Tea Party.
I've heard of it.
And I was like, limited government? Heck yes. Public schools? Well, it's a private good. We should put a toll road on every single private road. And I was happy to go down any sort of libertarian dream world you wanted me to.
Rand Paul, baby!
Yeah, changed a little bit. But I have a lot of those sympathies still. You say you got elected that year, 2010, and you say now on your Substack that we're experiencing something of a Tea Party-like moment, where there should be a Tea Party-like fervor that can be tapped into for positive benefit. Tell me a little bit about that, because again, we're not a homogenous group, and I'm going to guess when I say Tea Party, not everyone here is like, yes, let's go for round two.
So let's look at, so here's an interesting thing about the Tea Party. There's Tea Party of 2010 and then 2012 and on. 2010 was just a bunch of people that were pissed off at government, and you would have like, literally I had one rally, 10,000 people showed up at in Illinois. And then Republicans take the majority and the Tea Party gets shrunk. And it's shrunk to basically the crazies that went in there because nobody else would accept them, okay? So as an example, in 2010, as a Tea Party guy, I was never told, I never said I would never raise the debt limit. I'm like, you have to raise the debt limit. That was okay to them. In 2012, that made you a heretic, right? So that changed. So the lesson, though, is what's important, which is Obama's elected president, and then August of basically the equivalent of this year in his term for Trump, everybody starts going to these town hall meetings, and boom, everything's exploding. It's all over the news. That catches fire, right? And I use that against my opponent too. And everybody goes to these town hall meetings. It's all over the news. It grows this thing. People start now going to other rallies and they start protesting offices. Now, that's what caught fire. By the way, that's already started last week. We're 7 months ahead of that, by the way. Now, the difference is the Tea Party was based on some ideology, less government, et cetera, et cetera. This is maybe not going to be based directly on ideology, because I think it'll have members of the left, the center, and the sane right. This is about reclaiming our democracy. And I think just as importantly, it's about saying the guy that's worth $500 billion that is likely to be the first trillionaire in this country, in the world, and the most powerful man in the world do not have a right to tell me how to live, right? Our country never intended, I'm going to sound like a Occupy Wall Street person in saying this, but our country never intended at its founding for somebody worth $500 billion to have any more say than you have, even if you're living paycheck to paycheck. You have as much of a right to government as they do. And that is going to be, I think, the thing that unites us all in this is like, no. We are taking our country back because we think that we should have a say in government and not a couple people, one who's riddled on ketamine and the other one who doesn't think about anything but himself. We believe that we should be in charge. And I think that's what's going to unite us. Now, of course, then after, whatever this is takes power, there will be debates. That's great. That's called democracy. But right now, what we have is not democracy. And I think, honest to God, I think this is growing. I think it's catching fire. And by the way, in your district, if your congressman is unwilling to do a town hall, force him to. Demand it. Make the press demand it of them. Everybody to ask them, when are you going to do a town hall? And then when they do it, make sure you go and let them know how you feel. It is the most miserable experience as a member of Congress, and it's very effective. I can say that now. I used to be like, I love town halls, guys. I love them. Now I can be like, that sucks.
I have thoughts. I've been booed at a few of them. Was the 2020 election stolen?
Yes, you did.
You're really going to ask me that in front of everyone?
Yep.
No.
Yep.
I mean, the answer's no, and that wasn't the right answer in those crowds.
Yeah.
All right. You're making me itch a little bit with the Occupy Wall Street, and I don't know if that was because of their hygiene or because it's my limited governance sympathies, but something else that makes me itch a little bit, but is very well intended from some of the people in this room and then some of the people in Phoenix, Arizona, will say, just join the Dems. It's the other party. What are one or two things that the Dems would really have to improve on for it to be a tantalizing offer to you?
Yeah, look, I don't know if it really has to improve on anything. My point is that, I don't need the Democrats to say, okay, now we believe more of what you do, Adam. Right? What I want is, and I actually think they're doing better, they're far better than the Republicans, is recognition that they are a party. It's a very recent phenomenon that parties actually required you to believe certain things. There was always a variance within the party. You remember there used to be liberal Republicans, conservative Republicans, liberal Democrats, conservative Democrats. A party was kind of a power structure that generally believed the same thing, but there were differences in it. The Democrats, if they accept that, and I've seen it. I've seen Democratic Party support conservative candidates in red states, for instance. I think that's how you build a winning coalition. I may not agree with Adam, for instance, or Stephen on every issue, but I do agree on the big issues, which is the role of government, the fact that democracy matters. And again, then when you take power, you can deal with the inconvenience of disagreeing on issues, and you use the democracy you just saved to deal with that.
So I know you're not running for office, but that sounded like you were pretty open to an invitation.
Look, I would say this,
from our brethren on the left, the party that neither you nor I has ever been part of. That wasn't you need to fix this.
Yeah.
That was just make a big enough tent for me.
Yeah, I think that's it. Obviously, if I'm sitting down with Democratic leaders and they're like, hey, how should we change our messaging? I'll have some input. I'll have some thoughts. But the big thing is just be willing to accept people that are different, because that's how you get to 51 or more. You're not going to get to 51%. You're not going to get to 51% by saying your view on this is different than ours, you don't belong. Because then, okay, well, I'll wander around and figure out who to vote for at that moment. Not me, but most people. And so, yeah, would I ever run again? I'd be open to it. Would I ever be open to running as a Democrat? I wouldn't say no. It's all just where can I make the most difference and where can the most difference be made?
Okay.
Thanks.
2 questions left, and the second to last one is picking up on that point. Where can I make a difference? I spent the last 4 years of my life trying to tell people that the 2020 election wasn't stolen and that anyone who said otherwise was doing a disqualifyingly bad thing for American democracy. Yes, but that obviously didn't win the day in Arizona, where Donald Trump won by 100,000 votes. Are we making an impact? And how are you measuring that?
It's a great question, and I think it's important for us to look at a broader horizon than, say, the last election. So for you, and I understand the feeling, I wrestle with it every day, for you to say, look, I didn't make a difference because Trump won Arizona, yeah, in the short term, you could look at that and say that's accurate, but here's the thing. If you had not constantly said that the election was not stolen, it very well, with all of us out there saying it too, it very well would be accepted fact now that the election was stolen, or at least there wouldn't be a question in some people's minds. And you think about the corrosion on democracy there. And I can tell you that I really believe in 4 years that there's not going to be a single person left in America that will ever admit they supported Donald Trump, by the way. That's like my little private prediction. And but all of that is going to be because even though there's a moment where in a storm, it's really dark, we kept the torch lit. And even if the torch is lit and it's just like barely putting out any light and nobody's paying attention, you got to keep that fire going of truth. Because then when the moment strikes, where all of a sudden the clouds clear and light is desperately needed, and you've got the fire already going, boom, it'll pick up. Because America, honest to God right now, is desperate for unity. They're dry for truth. And the fact that people like you kept saying the truth has an impact far beyond what happened last election. It's going to impact, literally will echo for decades. So yes, I think we're winning, and I think we're going to keep winning. And ladies and gentlemen, the other thing I'll say is take the burden off your shoulder. Be happy. We're all in this together. This is not resting only on your shoulders. We're all doing this.
Okay. My last question. Appreciate your indulgence. It recently came to light that a number of years ago, there was a lady in Milwaukee who, in an alleyway, was being attacked by a man with a knife. And it was a desperate situation. But lo and behold, Adam Kinzinger happened to have been there, took the man down, saved the woman's life, and she's recently started talking about it. And so I was hoping for this last little section. I asked around some of the guys I work with, including one of the good guys that put in a lot of work into this program, and I said, does anyone have a knife I could borrow? And he said, like, all good Republicans carry knives. I was like, I've never even shot a gun, so I guess maybe that's why I didn't work out so well. And then he gave me this little pocket knife, and I don't know if he was just trying to emasculate me or but it didn't look very threatening. And then I saw it, but I took it anyways, and then I saw the security things, and I'm like such not a criminal that like my hands started sweating just even bringing the little pocket knife. So instead I got this plastic knife, and I was hoping you could just real quickly sort of show what that looks like, because I think I'm pretty good. Like I could have beaten him at a game of horse or a race, but like, what does this look like? So, will you indulge me?
Yes, let's do it.
All right.
We're gonna reenact this. First time I've ever reenacted this.
Okay, so there's a lady who's over there. This is an alleyway.
Yep.
And I've got a knife. Do I hold it like
Well,
this?
he threw her on the ground and started trying to cut her head off.
Okay, so.
Yeah. And then he gets up, she runs over to me, and he's following her with a blank look.
Okay.
And then I'm like debating in my mind. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'm going to die. I would fight a guy with a gun before I'd fight a guy with a knife. And but I remember two thoughts. One was, I can't watch this happen to her and live with myself the rest of my life. And the other was like, I'm going to get hurt doing this. Anyway, she ends up getting in a car behind me. He's like you, coming after her. And then I blank out, but I've seen it in the security cameras. I grab his knife hand, pull it away, and I throw my arm around his neck, your neck. And at that point, I'm fighting for my life. And we're grappling, and I end up, thank God, got him down. And I had actually made the decision to kill him, but thankfully I didn't do that. But yeah, that's how it went. Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, Adam Kinzinger,
Thank
an
you,
American
guys.
hero.
Thank you.